Education around the world has become a serious problem. Over 100 million children don't have access to public schools. This means that many children will not attend elementary school, middle school, nor high school. This is because in many countries, education is not an option. It has to do a lot with economic struggles, politics, and other things. Right here is an empty classroom out in South America where students used to go to school, but due to money problems in this country, this school has been closed. Next, we are going to talk about enrollment rate. This diagram shows that income has to do a lot with if you get an education or not. As shown in this diagram, low-income countries are the most affected by not getting an education. 80% of its population get an education, but 20% of its population doesn't get an education, compared to high-income countries where almost 100% of its population get to have an education. So this is a serious problem where gender plays a big role, because a lot of girls don't have the opportunity to get an education, and all of this has to do a lot with money and the income in between countries. Now let's look at another problem. Life is all about reading, writing, and math, but the thing is that 250 million people don't know the alphabet. This means that these people don't know how to read and write, which is a serious problem, and less likely they will know how to do math. Without these tools, most likely people will always be in poverty because of their lack of education. Without reading or writing, the chances of getting a job are extremely low. Not knowing how to read and write is like not knowing your own language, and it will be very hard for you to communicate with other people. Reading and writing is needed on a daily basis, and if you do not know how to read and write, it will affect you for the rest of your life. This is something that happens very often in developing countries, and today it is still a major problem where a lot of people don't know how to read and write. We are supposed to change this in order to help the world and all of its people. Now let's look at the investments in education. Many countries don't invest their money in education simply because they don't have the money, or that money goes someplace else, such as war, or to political leaders who are corrupt. A very important quote from the Global Economic Symposium is, "Education has its price everywhere, but the only thing more expensive than investing in education is not investing in education." This means that not giving an education will only make the country fall behind and not progress. The sad thing is that countries, especially developing countries, have not yet given an education to all of its people. The ones who get educated are the ones who have the money needed to get an education. But as said, not all people have the money needed to get an education. Also, one big problem with education in third world countries is that there is a lack of education. Teachers aren't prepared or don't have the tools necessary in order to educate their students. This is because the government doesn't invest in education, meaning that these so-called educated teachers most likely have a poor level of education. This education then gets passed to students, which is no good at all. Students are just wasting their time at school because this education they're getting won't be useful at all for the real world. The most important thing is to have well-educated teachers, because if they don't, then what's the point of going to school? Subsequently, education could bring equality when it comes to women. Women don't have the same rights as men when it comes to education. This means that millions of dollars and up to billions of dollars are being lost every year by not educating women. When women are educated, most likely they don't work, and if you don't work, you are not making money for yourself, your family, or your country. In some places, women might be educated, but they are not given the same education as boys. Boys are treated better in a sense where they get a better education just because of their gender. Girls are separated in a different category where they get educated, but they do not get as good as an education as boys. If girls were to get an education, this would benefit families, communities, and the country itself. There would be less poverty and more work, especially in agriculture. Just by giving an education to women, there will be less mortality rates and starvation. This could all change for the better if women were to get an education.
Through education, you can also better yourselves in other ways. You learn how to think critically and find solutions to unexpected challenges. I remember we used to ask our teachers, why am I going to need algebra? Well, you may not have to solve for X to get a good job or to be a good parent, but you will need to think through tough problems. You'll need to think on your feet. You'll need to know how to gather facts and evaluate information. So, math teachers, you can tell your students that the president says they need algebra. Education also teaches you the value of discipline. That the greatest rewards come not from instant gratification, but from sustained effort and from hard work. This is a lesson that's especially true today in a culture that prizes flash over substance, that tells us that the goal in life is to be entertained, that says you can be famous just for being famous. I mean, you get on a reality show, don't know what you've done, suddenly you're famous. But that's not going to lead to lasting, sustained achievement. And finally, with the right education, both at home and at school, you can learn how to be a better human being. For when you read a great story or you learn about an important moment in history, it helps you imagine what it would be like to walk in somebody else's shoes, to know their struggles. The success of our economy will depend on your skills, but the success of our community will depend on your ability to follow the golden rule, to treat others as you would like to be treated.
Mm-hmm.